Chapter 12. I can't say that Jabba and I became friends exactly, but after that day, we understood each other better. And sometimes, when the vegetables had ripened and we started picking them and boxing them up, we even had a bit of a laugh, especially when one of the aubergines had a funny shape like something rude. Jabba didn't say any more about thinking about the Islamic State nutters were cool, and I wouldn't have listened if he had. Things were getting really, really bad all over the country, especially in the north. I didn't follow it all. I left that to Musa, who was electrified by every bit of news that came his way. Occasionally he persuaded Baba to take him back into town for a couple of days. He said he wanted to meet up with his old teachers and get work for private study, but I knew what he was up to. On Thursday evenings, in August, I heard him come back from town, and then I saw that this Thursday evening he had a smart new laptop. I'd been lying on the cushions in our little house, playing a card game with Freud, and I sat up to have a look. Baba bought that for you, didn't he? I was boiling with indignation. That's so unfair, he laughed. Are you kidding? How did you get it then? You didn't nick it. It was just my luck that Mum come in and heard me. Oh, Ma, she said, shocked. How could you say such a thing? Musa's got some very kind friends. It's good to know that even in these bad times, some people think about others who need special help. Musa winced. I hid a smile. Ma went back out again. Friends there? Don't tell me. It was Bassem, wasn't it? Don't tell me what you're going to do with it either. He ignored me and started tapping the keys, frowning with frustration. I tried again. Hello, it's me, your favourite brother. Don't suppose you'd let me play games on it, would you? He looked up. Are you kidding? Seriously, Omar, don't touch this thing. It's got a built-in satellite link, but that makes it easy to detect. It must never be online for more than a minute at a time. They can trace it if you're on it for longer. Soldiers could come here and get at me. I shivered. Musa, you can't do this. It's too dangerous. Anyway, how's Bassem going to pick up your messages? His phone must have died weeks ago. He looked at me. His dad's got a generator. You know how rich they are. Anyway, I can't not. Getting the word out there, telling the world what this wicked government is doing to our country. It's the only thing, the one thing I can do. I suppose Ma thought, when she made us all come to live on the farm, that the trouble would stay in the city. She was right at first, but then things began to change. There were shortages in the country too. Food was getting more and more expensive. It was lucky that Uncle Mahmood's farm was a big one, and that Auntie Fazia had picked and stored so much of last year's harvest. The farm animals gave us eggs and milk and meat occasionally, and she had big dry stores of lentils and flour and rice. Nothing really bad had happened so far in our village, but there were reports all the time of army vehicles being blown up, attacks on policemen, horrible reprisals by the government forces, ambushes and arrests, and everyone knew what arrests meant. Prisoners would be starved, beaten, tortured, and probably shot. The knots in my stomach were tightening up again. I was worried about Musa most of all, but I was scared that something bad would happen to Baba too. He was still living in Dara in a small room he'd rented on the outskirts, trying to get to work. Ma kept trying to call him on her ancient mobile. She'd hardly ever got through, but when she did, she'd relay his instructions to us and repeat our dutiful replies, which she had to make up half the time. Once or twice, when she was on the phone to him, I saw her eyes flick towards Aman and move away again. Then she'd go outside where we couldn't hear her. I knew what she was up to, though. I suppose Baba's right, I told myself uncertainly. Aman can't be a teacher now, so she ought to get married. She's got to have someone to look after her. The thought of what would happen to my sister if rampaging soldiers stormed the farm was so terrifying that it kept me awake sometimes, even though I was always worn out from the day's work. I didn't realise it at the time, but the person who was keeping us all together was Auntie Fazia. She wasn't someone you would have noticed, quite honestly, if you'd have passed her in the street. She was short and sort of round all over. Her ankle-length dresses were old and worn, her hijab was always on crooked, and her face and hands were leathery and wrinkled from being in the sun. She always had a wart on her chin, and that had bristles coming from it. Ma was only a couple of years younger, but you'd have thought that Auntie Thazia was her mum, rather than her sister. Auntie Thazia had a way of sweeping us all up in her life and making us all feel as if we belonged there. She talked so much it was easy to think that she was just a silly old woman, but she never said anything unkind. She liked laughing too, and when she did, her whole body wobbled like a bowl of shaken yoghurt. By September, the fiercest heat of the summer had softened a bit. The grapes on the vine that grew over a frame in the courtyard were ripening, and Ma and Auntie Thazia had spent days bottling, pickling, making jam, and filling shelf after shelf of jars for the winter. Friday had come round again. Uncle Mahmood took us boys to the mosque as he always did, and when we got home, we found the donkey standing in the middle of the courtyard with his 2 pannier baskets already filled up with plastic containers, while Auntie Thazia was tying bundles of rugs and cushions onto his back. "We're going on a picnic," she announced, laughing at our faces. "Down by the cistern, where there'll be a nice cold breeze." Jabba and I caught each other's eye, then looked quickly away. We hadn't gone back to the cistern since the day when I'd fallen in. It had seemed like a forbidden place somehow. Floyd had found a chicken to chase and was running after it, flapping his arms around and shouting, "Picnic, picnic!" Ma came out of the kitchen carrying a basket. "Stop that, Floyd. Here, take this basket." "Omar, you'll have to carry the crate of drinks. It's heavy. Don't drop it." "Musa Bibi, will you manage? It's quite a long walk. Where's Aman?" "There she is." "What are you wearing that old thing for? I told you to put on another dress, didn't I? Go and tidy yourself up. Hurry up." Iman opened her mouth to object, but Uncle Mahmood was fiddling with the donkey's girth, and she didn't dare argue in front of him. She flounced into our house. "It's only a stupid picnic, for heaven's sake," Musa muttered to me. "Why has she got to dress up?" He was obviously irritated by it all, but everyone else looked happy. The little girls were darting around excitedly. Auntie Thasia was beaming. Granny was hanging on doggedly to a walking stick that Uncle Mahmood had cut for her, and even Jabba was smiling. It felt as if we were celebrating something. "Here, give me a hand on that stupid crate," said Musa. "Let's get started before some idiot tells me I can't manage it." The path was rough and it was easy to slip on the loose stones. I could tell when we were halfway down that Musa was struggling and that the crate was really too heavy for him, but I knew he'd die rather than show it. "You know what you are," I said to wind him up. "What? Stupid? Huh? That's rich coming from you?" We exchanged insults all the way down the rest of the slope, and by the time everyone else arrived, the donkey trotting along behind, Musa and I were sitting under the old fig tree, and I was showing him exactly where I'd found the scorpion. "Yeah, right," he said disbelievingly, when I opened my hands to show him how big it had been. "Scorpions that big don't exist." As I remember it, there was something golden about that afternoon. A light breeze stirred the still green leaves of the grove of fig and olive trees. The cistern was nearly empty now, but frogs still plopped occasionally in the shallow water. I felt, I don't know why, a rush of love for all of my family, and even a little bit fond of Jabba. As I sat with my back against the rough, grey trunk of a fig tree, looking round at all of them, it was as if I was noticing things I'd never noticed before. Uncle Mahmood had lit a fire and was roasting skewers of lamb over it. I saw from the glances he sent over to Auntie Fazia and the nod she gave in return that they actually loved each other. He made me feel a bit sad, actually, because there were nothing like that between Ma and Baba. Nothing I'd ever seen before, anyway. I understood, too, that Jabba was boiling inside to get away from the farm and do something big in the world. I even felt sympathetic. I watched Granny push up her loose black sleeve and lean forward to take a stuffed vine leaf from the dishes piled on the cloth laid out on the ground, and noticed for the first time how her hand had trembled. She looked up and caught my eye. She looked puzzled all of a sudden, as if she didn't quite know who I was. She's really old, I thought. Imam was tying ribbons in Yasmin's hair, laughing at something Floyd had said. For the first time, I realised that my sister was beautiful. Ma was watching her too. She was on the edge for some reason, and kept looking up towards the village. I'd eaten all I could and was wondering if I could possibly squeeze in another few grapes, when Yasmin planted herself in front of me, her eyes dancing with anticipation. "You've got to chase us," she said. "Me and Nadia and Fatima." I felt too lazy and full to get up. "Brr," I growled, making my hands into claws and pretending to be a lion. "Be careful or I'll eat you." She screamed with delight and ran behind the tree. "No, you've got to chase us properly," she shouted. Jabba had got up already, and I wasn't going to be outdone, so I lumbered to my feet. It was fun chasing the little girls, scaring them with our growls and snarls. Nadia got tired of it almost at once and went to sit on Ma's knee. Then Fatima, the smallest one, fell over, grazed her chin on a stone, burst into loud sobs and rushed into Auntie Fazia's lap to be comforted. Aman called her over to play cat's cradle, and Yasmin followed her. I stood there, panting. I didn't feel like sitting down again. "Want a game of football, Floyd?" Jabba called out. Floyd had been watching us enviously. He jumped up to his feet. "Yes, but you haven't got a ball." Jabba went over to the donkey, who was hitched to the furthest tree, looking half asleep, and dug to the bottom of one of the baskets. "Oh, hey!" he said triumphantly, pulling out a shapeless bundle of blue plastic bags wrapped around an old drinks can. I tried not to let my disgust show in my face. Jabba's ball was what all the poor kids in the village played with, what the postcard sellers in the old ruins in Bosra had made for themselves. But I had once had a proper ball, with black and white panels all over it. It'd be flattened now, and unrecognisable, buried under the tons of concrete. Jabba was watching me suspiciously, and I can almost see the words, "Not posh enough for you," rising up from his head in a speech bubble. "I'll be a goalie," I said quickly. "See those two stones over there? You've got to shoot between them. Penalty shootout, shouted Floyd excitedly. He kicked out wildly at the ball, and it landed with a spatter in a half-finished bowl of salad right in the middle of the picnic. Auntie Thazia only laughed and waved us away, as if she was shooing away flies. Go further away. Play over there. It was the first time I played football with Jabba. The ground was all rocks and stones. The ball kept unravelling, and Floyd kicked in every other direction but the right one. Even so, I hadn't had so much fun in ages. You boys at Cot, Auntie Thazia called out as we stopped at last, panting. Come and have a drink. Floyd rushed up to give me a high five. I surprised myself by giving one to Jabba too. I was just gulping down the last mouthful of a long, cool drink of water when Floyd shouted out, Look, Baba's coming. Everyone's heads swivelled round. Baba, who looked out of place in his city suit and polished shoes, was picking his way down the path towards us. Someone else was walking along a few paces behind him. The sun was low in the sky, and I had to shade my eyes to see properly, and my stomach kicked, and the hairs on my arms stood up, because the man coming down the slope towards us was none other than Mr. Nosy. You know how sometimes there's a thing at the edge of a nightmare, a sort of nameless dread. Mr. Nosy was that thing for me. It had been over a year and a half since I'd watched him terrifying kind old Uncle Ali, making him shut up his shop and flee from town, but I'd never forgotten the threat that oozed out of him, like poison dripping off a snake's tongue. Uncle Mahmood had been slumped on a cushion, gently snoring, but at a nudge from Auntie Fazia, he struggled to his feet and hastily straightened the keffiyeh on his head. The little girls hid shyly behind their mothers. Imam, hissed Ma, pull your hijab straight, your hair showing. Musa was examining Mr. Nosy with the usual watchful look he gave to strangers. Musa, I thought, with another stab of fear. He's come to arrest him. I stepped across to Musa, bent down and whispered in his ear, Play dumb, be careful, he's dangerous. Musa cocked an eye at me. Doesn't look scary, he whispered back. Got a face like a rat. I gripped his arm. He must have felt my fingers trembling. He's the man who threatened Uncle Ali. Secret police. Musa shuddered and let his head droop sideways, an inane grin spreading across his face. Mr. Nosy was looking in our direction, and I tried to smile politely, willing him not to recognise me. Come here, boys, Baba called out. I helped Musa ostentatiously to his feet. He'd gone floppy, and it needed all my heft to lift him. No need to overdo it, I growled at him. You weigh a ton. I could feel his own hand trembling under mine. He was as scared as I was. We made our way slowly past the ruins of the picnic to stand at the edge of the group of men. Jabba was there already. I was in such a state by then that I could hardly follow the men's conversation. They had moved away to stand beyond the trees, respectfully ignoring the women who were beginning to clear up the picnic. Mr. Nosy's real name, it seemed, was Bilal. He had a cousin in the village. He had brought his mother from Bosra on a family visit. They'd be staying for a few days, and his mother would very much like to visit Musa and Jabba in the morning. As he spoke, I noticed that he was shooting sideways glances towards Oman, and a dreadful suspicion burst into my head. Mr. Nosy, with his rat-like face and creepy eyes, 35 years old at least, and stinking of menace, had come to marry my sister and force himself into the heart of our family. That can't be right, I told myself. Baba couldn't. He wouldn't. But then I caught sight of Oman. She was sitting bolt upright, spots of red flowing in her cheeks, her eyes round with shock. Ma was sitting next to her, patting her arm, whispering words of encouragement. Ma knows, I thought disbelievingly. She's in on it too. I couldn't bear to stay so close to that rat, the rat, as I now called Mr. Nosy in my head. I saw that Auntie Thazia was struggling to fold up one of the big rugs she'd been sitting on, and stumbled off to help her. Has that man come to marry Oman? I mouthed to her. She waggled her head from side to side in a non-committal sort of way. I could see she knew all about it, but didn't like the idea any more than I did. Oman suddenly made a strangled noise, got up, and began to run towards the house, nearly tripping on her long skirt. Ma hurried after her. I saw Mr. Nosy following them with his weaselly little eyes, and I clenched my fists, wishing I could punch him. I wanted to run after Ma and Oman. I wanted to tell Oman that I'd never let that man take her away, but I knew there was nothing I could do. I had as much power as that wretched little donkey, still dozing away in the shade of the trees.